It's 13th Age, I'm talking about 13th Age, and also the term D&D-Killer is bad. We don't need to kill D&D, we can all play whatever dragon game we like and still all be friends, but this video is about why I think 13th Age should be a contender in the current conversation about games to potentially move to from 5e, and why I think that the Pelgrane Press marketing team is sort of missing the boat right now, especially with a second edition of 13th Age in the works. And generally, my rants and thoughts about, D&D-Killer discourse. So, Daggerheart, DC-20, the MCDM RPG, Tales of the Valiant from Cobalt Press, all of these are being talked about as games your 5e only group can move to. Some of the marketing for these games, directly or indirectly, is a lot about just this game not being 5e. Play this because it's not 5e. Play this because it does things differently or fixes these things that are bad about 5e. I think out of all of these, DC-20 and Tales of the Valiant are a bit more straightforward about it. DC-20 just comes right out and says, hey, action economy kind of sucks in 5e, so here's a thoughtful way to fix it, which isn't as heavy as Pathfinder, but gives you a lot more depth than 5e. MCDM and Daggerheart go a different route and are not D20 games, which allows them to break away a little bit more from D&D isms, but both of those games trend pretty closely to the overall D&D experience. Some of the criticisms for these games, specifically DC-20 and Tales of the Valiant, is that they feel a bit like just a bunch of house rules for 5e and that the games don't really stand up on their own, which honestly I think is not a fair criticism at all, because you can dismissively say that about so many games. Like you can say, oh, Band of Blades is just some house rules for Blades in the Dark, which, sure, it uses the same core system to thoughtfully do something else. So much of art and games work that way. And most of these games are genuinely trying to do something. Unlike Band of Blades and Blades in the Dark, they're not necessarily trying to tell a very different type of story, but they are going for a different play experience. DC-20, I feel, is very honest about very specifically being a different interpretation of D&D. Tales of the Valiant, from what I've read so far, and I did read quite a bit of it, does feel a little too close to just being 5e for me. Like, Channel Divinity just works a little bit differently, that I think that if I ran it for a group that's used to 5e, it would be confusing. Generally, my challenge with these games is that they try to occupy the same spot at the table, the spot of your go-to big fantasy game. If you're very invested in Pathfinder, for example, as your main game, you're likely not playing a whole lot of 5e. When you do go and play other games, maybe you venture further into games that are different, that are not fantasy games, or that don't use the same D20 core system. If you were to start playing DC-20 or Daggerheart, it will likely take the spot of a campaign that you would otherwise have played in 5e, or Pathfinder. But I hear you say, my group will only play 5e and we don't like Wizards of the Coast anymore, and we've noticed how every single YouTube video about 5e is about how to fix this thing in D&D, and arrived at the conclusion that maybe a game with so many things to fix is not a very good game. I know it also just has a ton more people playing it and tearing it apart for years, so of course it will have more content about, more ideas about how to change things. D&D is fine, I'm just having some fun with this. But if you are looking for an alternative to your main fantasy game, I'm here to tell you that all of these games, great as they may be, need to step aside, because the best one has been in the room with us all along, and it is 13th Age. I have another video on this channel about why I love 13th Age, but here's a quick recap. It was made by the lead designers who worked on 3rd and 4th edition of D&D, and it's a way more narrative version of D&D. It describes itself as a love letter to D&D, and that's cheesy, but it's true. It's a D20 system, the core mechanic is the same, so it's really easy to learn if you've played any edition of D&D, but the experience of playing it is different. Here are a few reasons why I think you should be looking at this game if you're looking at all those other games. One, this game has been around for a while. People have been playing this and battle testing it for years. It has a ton of really good published adventures and materials. The supplements, the bestiaries, the books of loot are all really good and have been used at actual tables. There's a very active Reddit and Discord community, and those people are nice. They won't be dicks to you just because you play 5e. I'm looking at you, r/RPG. Stop being mean to 5e players. 2, there's a second edition coming. They just wrapped a successful Kickstarter. It was not as successful as DC-20's, but it should have been. That's why I think their marketing team is missing the boat. There's a moment right now for D&D alternatives, and this is the best one, and that is the correct opinion. You can have another opinion, that's okay, but it would be wrong. Anyway, 13th Age should be everywhere right now. They need to be making videos, actual plays, they need to have Professor Dungeon Master talking about it. Now is the time. I backed the Kickstarter, by the way, and I read through the preview rules, and they are good. This is a game that's been out for a while, like I said, and now there's a second edition that fixes things. None of these other games have second editions yet. They're all at 0 point something editions. Come on. 3, it's a fantastic gateway into a broader world of role-playing. If you have a group that will only play D&D, 13th Age will introduce them into a more narrative way to play, specifically with things like the icon system, one unique thing, and mostly with how skills work, where you don't have a set list of skills, but instead you distribute points into 2 or 3 skills that make sense for your character. Like, former cavalry sergeant can be a skill, so maybe you can add that bonus to every horse-related situation, or every situation where the fact that you are a cavalry sergeant can come into play. And then with every role, we learn a little bit more about your character. I found that these mechanics really help players open up, because the core mechanic feels like D&D, but all of a sudden the game gives you mechanics through which your character's story is the world building. So when you go play Ironsworn or Dungeon World or any other game that goes further into, narrative chaos, your players have already taken their first baby step away from the rigid structure of D&D and started changing their thinking just a little bit, and it'll be easier for them. 4, it's way easier to run, in my opinion, at least, than any other D&D variant. Monster design is very clever in 13th Age, and monsters will do different things depending on how you roll for them. And I found that it achieves many of the goals that a lot of third-party D&D supplements try to. For example, I really like this book, the MCDM Monster book. I think it's very good, but I mean, look at these stat blocks. They're crazy. 13th Age monsters are way easier to run and are incredibly dynamic, and loot is easier too. The game handwaves most of the equipment and focuses on what it calls true magic items, of which there are fewer, and they're all themed around the icons, so it's very easy to improvise and just pick a piece of loot to award players. 5, there are no filler levels. 13th Age only has 10 levels for each class, and they are all very meaningful. Characters in 13th Age are very powerful from level 1. This is a big damn heroes kind of game. So I will say that D&D, like 5th edition D&D, is better at the nobodies who slowly become gods kind of story, but I don't know, the few times that I've played high level D&D, it just felt like such a chore. In 13th Age, levels 8, 9, and 10 are crazy, but you usually only experience them towards the end of the game. In 5e, at least for me, anything beyond level 10 was exhausting. 6, every class is interesting. All the classes have really unique things going on at every level, and most of the classes are kind of their own little mini game, and I just found them so much fun to play with. There's a ton of other designs that I love about this game. I love how recoveries work. I love all the loosey-goosey narrative rules. I love that you don't really need to calculate like distances, and you operate on a very clear near, far, very far, almost zone-based system in combat, so it's tactical, but it's also more narrative than other D&D variants. And I go into a lot of these in more depth in my Why I Love 13th Age video. If you're looking for a lot of crunch and rules and structures for everything, this probably isn't the game for you. Pathfinder 2nd edition is probably the way to go. But if you're looking for a narrative about the same level of complexity as 5e, but still with a lot of depth and complexity when you want it, then this is a game worth checking out. At least for me, when I played it, it felt closer to the experience that I thought playing D&D would be like. So I ended up with 13th Age as my go-to big fantasy game. But also, I gotta say, don't let people bully you out of the game that you like. If you like playing D&D and your group plays it and you're all busy and learning new games, doesn't sound interesting, it's fine. Play whatever game makes you happy and play whatever game gets people to your table. But if you are looking for other games, I think 13th Age is really great. That's it. That's all I got. Go play a game.